Lindy had to turn sideways to enter the narrow tunnel. Scraping against the rocks, she stepped through the opening. For the next 20 feet, she sidestepped down the tunnel, feeling her way with her hands. The tunnel got darker and warmer the deeper she went. The tunnel curved and widened. In the distance, she could see an orange-red glow. Another step and she was standing in a dim light. As she walked toward it, it brightened her path. She figured that she had to be at least 20 yards into the mountain. It was getting even warmer. She could feel the sweat dripping down her face. The stinging on her arms was stronger. Another 10 paces and a surge of hot, fog-like gas struck her. She had just stepped into a large cavern with gaseous vapors floating in the air. Facing her 30 feet ahead stood a hooded figure lit by an orange glow. Spooky? It had to be. He moved forward as he pulled his hood back. Illuminated by the glow of a pool of lava that formed a horseshoe to the sides and behind him, the scars on his face were an odd mixture of beauty and horror, the blood glistening like rubies, the sweat glimmering like diamonds, the dried blood making jagged furrows across his face. She froze. Before, there had only been sketches. Even in her dulled state, this shocked her. He turned away from her and moved to the edge of the molten pool. She heard him utter a single word, Topilo. He stepped forward toward the bright orange pool. Her eyes widened. The hollow echo of a melodious note, as if from an orchestra, filled the cavern. In the vapors rising from the lava, large black wings shot up from the pool and enveloped him as he stepped forward. Churning the vapor, the wings swirled down into the glowing lava. He was gone. Only silence and the vaporous glow from the lava remained. A horrified Lindy had watched Spooky being devoured. Worse still, he appeared to have willingly been incinerated, cremated while alive. While she had not seen his skin blistered and blackened, and then his flesh baked from his bones, her mind told her that must have happened. The terror of the imagined sight sent her heart pounding. The heat from the lava seemed to pierce her skin now. Her arms felt inflamed. Was being swallowed and burned alive awaiting her? No. She would not walk to a horrifying death. The thought of her flesh being set on fire pushed her back 2 steps. She took another step back, but as she set her foot on the ground, her foot was pulled forward. She tried again, but instead of her foot starting to move back, it came forward. She tried to turn around. Her hips barely moved. She thought, if I stay still, if I don't lift my leg, it won't be pulled forward. She tried to plant her feet firmly as if she were driving them into the ground. Her foot came off the ground. Unwillingly, she had stepped forward. Her other foot came off the ground. She tried to force it backward. It moved forward. She was being pulled step by step toward the pool. Her mind panicked. She trembled at the vision that her mind was creating of her horrific death. She tried to lean back. She couldn't. Her head would no longer turn. Her body became rigid. Only her legs moved, and they acted against her command. Was she to die like Spooky? This wasn't right. She was chasing a sadistic murderer, and was guided by the voices of angels. This couldn't be right. There was nothing angelic about this. Had she been enticed by evil, or was this a test of her faith? She desperately wanted this to be a hallucination, a nightmare created in her foggy mind. She wanted to lash out at something, to fight, but her hands remained fastened to her sides. The will was there, but the ability was not. Her movement forward was slow but unceasing. The slower she moved, the more terrifying it became. One more step and she would be in the lava. That step meant a fiery consummation. The anticipation and certainty produced an unendurable wave of panic. She was going to die. She closed her eyes, prayed to God for mercy, praying harder than any other time in her life. She believed in Him like she had never believed before. She begged for forgiveness for the deadly sin that she had committed and for which she had never confessed. However, she wasn't forced to take that step. She teetered at the edge of the pool, drenched in fear, feeling the growing heat of the lava in every pore and wondering if God had saved her, hoping that he had. After a steady, unceasing pull to the pool of lava, she hadn't been forced to move any farther. She had control again, she could move. Was there a reason? Was this a test of her faith? Had God answered her prayers because she had prayed hard, fearfully and sincerely? Was this God's way of forcing or drawing her back into his flock? Had she been on the verge of being punished for her deadly sin but reprieved when she begged for forgiveness? If any of that were true, then what was Spooky? Was he an instrument of God? The wrath of God? The Old Testament God? The God of fire and brimstone making a point about one of the ultimate sins? Her sin. As she stared at the pool, black strands formed in the lava as if it were cooling. The strands became black patches. The patches spread, turning bright orange to black. The chamber darkened. She turned on her flashlight and backed away from the pool. As she turned to the left, searching for an exit, the beam of the flashlight swept along a wall 20 feet away. The beam skimmed across a dark mound near the wall. It looked to be about 5 feet long and a foot high. She swung the light back to it and let it rest on the mound. She gasped, her breath freezing halfway in. She stumbled back. From under her coat, she pulled and raised the trembling 9mm Glock waist high. She put the hand holding the flashlight under the wrist of the hand holding the gun to steady both of them. The gun still shook. She stared at the mound. Did it move? Was it? No. It couldn't be. She continued to stare, trying to define the shape. She hoped that it wasn't the body of the other woman. With her hands still shaking, she took a step toward it. Did it just move? No. It was the light playing on the vapors in the chamber. She needed to confirm if it really was the other woman. With each step, the sight became clearer and more horrific. The arms were spread wide over the head and staked into the ground. The legs were spread wider than the arms and staked. The earth near the torso was darker than the surrounding earth. The body had been sliced and spread open from the sternum to the vagina. The full force of the sight made its impact. Already starved of oxygen from the sulfur dioxide, her mind swirled. She gathered herself and tried to pull her mind from the fog. She forced herself forward. She shined her light into the cavity. The internal organs were a jumbled pile. She backed away, unable to stop staring at the other victim, the other woman. Was this from what God had saved Martin? Or was this the consequence of earning God's wrath? How could this be the work of God? How could Spooky have been God's instrument? She couldn't think clearly. She had to clear her head. She had to get out of the cave. A flash of orange light framed her shadow and another shadow on the wall in front of her. A deep voice echoing through the cavern jolted her. Do you know me? In twisting, jerky movements, she tried to locate the voice. Do you know me? It repeated louder. Her eyes darted around the cavern. The voice seemed to be everywhere. The voice impatiently boomed. Do you know me? She spun around but still saw nothing. She desperately tried to hold on to reality, but she could feel her tenuous grasp slipping away. Some force within her wanted her to let reality drift away, to accept this noxious nightmare. Through the fog in her mind, the anger in her rose. It is trying to destroy me. Do you know me? The voice commanded an answer. With her voice shaking with fury, she grabbed on to the last vestiges of reality and replied, I know you're a killer. She raised her gun and looked for a target. As she swung around, the dizziness increased. She stumbled and fell to one knee. Swaying unsteadily, she stood. She felt a warm breath on her ear. The gun was snatched from her hand. I am the darkness in your soul, the voice growled next to her ear. She turned her head. Inches away from her face were the oozing scars and piercing eyes of Spooky. He was still alive. Instinctive fear jerked her head back. She staggered away. He moved with her. She struck at him, missed, spun away, and crouched, spraying her light as she searched for him. She shook her head to clear the numbness. It remained. She rose. He was in front of her again. She struck again and missed again. Again, she couldn't locate him. Suddenly, she felt the scarred, blood-wet face against her cheek. She cringed and wrenched herself away from him. Her cheek felt damp. She frantically reached up and brushed the blood away. She looked at her hand, a foggy blur. Again, he was gone. Her vision swirled as she frenetically looked for him. Had Spooky become an apparition, a phantom? She spun to one side and then the other. She lost her balance. Her legs weakened. She forced herself to stand straight. She waited for the next attack. Even through the numbness of her mind, she had come to an undeniable conclusion. Spooky was no phantom, he still lived. The lava had not devoured him. She turned toward the glowing pool. Instantly, she was facing the same bloody, scar-riddled face. The glow of his eyes dissolved quickly into a deep, dull black. Fear shook her. As she stepped back, she pushed him. His chest felt as cold as ice. His expression was as cold as death. Her heart pounded. Her face felt numb. Her hands tingled. Locked in a confused fright, she forced the question. "What are you?" He backed away from her until he was at the edge of the pool. "I am the gatekeeper to the darkness within you. I am Paase, the guardian of Tapi-Lo, the vessel of his cold will." Every rational ounce left in her kept trying to tell her that none of this was real. That it was an illusion caused by the clouding effects of the gases. The reality was that a scarred man was a pathological killer who had mutilated his victims, and who had no remorse for the horror that he had inflicted. Her hate swelled. She could feel the darkness in her rising stronger than it had ever done before. She now knew that this cavern was where he terrorized and desecrated the two women. Would she be mutilated and killed here? Would she also be left on some doorstep as a symbolic gesture from a crazed mind? Her anger exploded. She would not beg, not plead for her life. If death were her fate, she would defy this monster before he defiled her. "I didn't kill them. I didn't savage them," he said. Her mind stuttered. He had answered a question that had only been in her mind. Why kill the women so savagely? He raised his arms, spread them wide, looked deeply into her eyes, smiled proudly, and in a booming voice proclaimed, "Tapi-Lo purified them. I am only the vessel of his will. I am Paase, his servant." A hate, the depth of which she had never felt before, raged. "No. You killed them. You mutilated them." He stared intensely at her and whispered, "Good. Hate. Let the darkness loose. Become what you are." She swayed slightly, steadied herself, and replied, "I'll tell you what I am. I am the detective who's going to arrest you or kill you. Your choice." Her voice echoed into the distant dark of the cavern. At that instant, the pool of lava glowed brightly. Spooky backed to the edge, and let himself fall backwards into it. The black-winged creature rose from the lava. A low, grating voice whispered, "I am Tapi-Lo, master of black souls. Feel the darkness in you. Become what you are." She felt a faint electrical current climbing up her spine. It hammered the base of her skull like an electric shock. The wave of electricity dispersed and tingled throughout her body. She saw a creature hovering over the pool of lava, the underside of it lit by the glow from the lava, its skeleton flowing streams of molten lava. Its eyes flashed bright orange. "Embrace the darkness. No. You cannot have me. My soul is mine. I am not after your soul. I want your hate. I want to see the darkness. Show me." She saw her gun on the ground 10 feet away. "I'll show you darkness." She stepped toward it. A fiery wing swung. The gun skidded 10 feet toward the cavern wall. "You cannot win," Tapi-Lo laughed. "Then I will die. I will not let you die." It's not your decision. It will be. She stumbled as she sprung toward the gun. Topilo pushed the gun against the wall. Martin staggered and fell. She pushed herself up, rose, and turned toward the gun. Martin picked up the gun. She swung back around to Topilo. He pulled his wings back and laughed. You cannot kill me! She fought the dizziness, steadied the wavering gun, aimed at the head, and took a shot. The bullet hit the middle of the creature's forehead. A hole formed. Lava filled the hole and turned black. Topilo laughed. She fired again and again. He remained unharmed. You cannot kill me! And you cannot have me! Lindy raised the gun and placed the barrel against her temple. Topilo roared. His wing lunged forward. The tip touched the barrel and molten lava began to flow from the fiery skeleton onto the gun. Martin howled and dropped the gun. I told you! I will not let you die! As the fiery pain created tears, anger, and contempt, Martin trembled. Yes. Get angry. Hate me. Let me feel it. Good. Feed me. Soon it will happen. Soon you will be mine. Martin howled and the cave filled with her bitter denial. I will never give in. What makes you think you have to? I only need to feel the darkness in you, and I have. No. I have given you nothing. But you have. Watch what the power of hate can do. Petroglyphs appeared. They flowed up the sides of the cavern walls and met in the middle in a circle over the molten pool. Mesmerizing layer after mesmerizing layer of petroglyphs laid one on top of the other. The swirling pictures dizzied her, but she didn't fall, she couldn't fall. Once again, she couldn't move. The layers piled up covering the dome of the cavern. She could feel her already numbed mind slipping further away as if she were being anesthetized. She had lost control of her thoughts. When the walls turned pitch black, the torrent of regret and guilt that she had been carrying for so long flooded her mind. Topilo pulled her forward over the searing lava. His wings enveloped her. The cavern filled with a bright flash of brilliant orange light. She saw herself in the operating room of the clinic. It was the day of her abortion, the abortion about which she had never told Parker. She was outside herself watching the operation. Suddenly the crucifix, which was still dangling from her wrist, grew heavy and hot. She felt the full horror of what she had done that day. She felt the full force of her mortal sin. She reached out. She wanted to yank herself from the operating table. The torment was unbearable. She burst into sobs and pleaded, "Oh God, please forgive me." There was another bright orange flash. Warm images, falling fluffy snowflakes, fields of flowers, waterfalls over sparkling spring pools, and the moonlit rainbow-colored waves of the ocean, appeared. It was beauty unbound by forgiveness. The feeling that accompanied the images swept into the core of her distress. The torment began to soften. The anxiety began to fade. It was as if she had been injected with a drug that soothed her. She could feel warmth and well-being coursing through her veins and into her mind. The feeling painted over the operating room, coding that horrible day. Calm and serenity surrounded her guilt and isolated it. She had carried the burden so long that she couldn't remember the last time that she didn't feel tortured by remorse and guilt. She never wanted to lose that feeling of relief. And then the voice came. Ignocerus. Eum protege. Ipsi voluntas Dei est. It was repeated 3 times. On the 4th repeat, the cavern began to blacken with each word. As the final syllable faded, total darkness enclosed her. Suddenly, she was thrust out of the darkness and onto the ground. She jerked herself around to see where she had been. The pool began to glow as if it were lighting the cavern for her. She stood and turned. Spooky, the self-proclaimed Paase, servant of Topilo, was standing near the tunnel 30 feet away. Mesmerized, she walked past him. The thought of arresting Spooky had vanished. Topilo had told her what she was to do. She didn't know Latin, but she knew what the message had said. Ignocerus. You are forgiven. Eum protege. Protect him. Ipsi voluntas Dei est. He is the will of God. In the cavern, Topilo had fed and urged her to embrace her guilt. His power came from the darkness in it, the place where hate thrives. His leverage over Lindy came from her agonizing, unappeasable, afflicting guilt. Like a drug dealer, he had given her a taste of relief, and she had instantly become addicted. The burden that Topilo lifted had given her something that she was willing to pay the price to keep. He had taken away the shame of the abortion. The mortal sin that she had committed, the mortal sin that had ceaselessly haunted and tormented her, had been forgiven, and along with it, her feeling of guilt had ended. Her loyalty had been purchased for forgiveness and a clear conscience. Topilo had created in her mind a new, however perverted, logic, an Old Testament biblical rationale. She would now protect the hideously scarred Spooky, the mutilator of sinful women and priests. Now in Lindy's mind, Spooky had become God's avenger from the Old Testament. It made perfect sense. After all, there are ample examples of ruthlessness, mutilations, savagery, and blind obedience in the Holy Bible. How much different was Spooky? Sins had been committed, and he was God's instrument of retribution. For Lindy, it was better to believe that than suffer eternal damnation and relentless, agonizing guilt. She headed into the tunnel. When she reached the curve in the tunnel, she looked back into the cavern. Backlit by the molten pool stood Spooky facing the pool of lava. He fell to his knees, spread his arms wide, and looked up as he leaned back. A whirling black shroud of petroglyphs rushed over and around him. They turned into shadowy wings, engulfed him, and dragged him deeper into the cavern. She pushed the image out of her mind and continued. The journey back to her car seemed quicker and easier than the journey to the cavern. She had left a heavy burden behind. Only when her hand touched the door handle did she feel that the haze of the cavern was wearing off. She stood for a minute as the enormity of the event sunk in and replayed. She had only a hazy memory of everything, even the operating room of the clinic. The only real difference from when she entered the cavern. Her guilt wasn't torturing her. She had been forgiven. As she backed her car around to leave, her headlights briefly flashed on a dark figure moving swiftly in the distance through the trees. She slowed and saw it no more. She shook it away as an illusory movement, an afterimage of the cavern. With her head still not completely clear, she drove slowly. Chapter 19. A dark red-lit figure. Skinner was moving through the trees at the switchback when Lindy's lights swept across the forest ahead. He scrambled behind two trees, which were growing close to each other. Her headlights, sliding along the trees, splashed bright bars into the forest, briefly illuminating a path that he could follow. He knew he was close to his car. He moved toward the road. He saw his car. He rushed to it, slung the unlocked door open, and scrambled behind the steering wheel. He fumbled for his keys. They were deep in his jeans pocket and thwarted his attempt to retrieve them. He straightened himself as best as he could and shoved his hand down until he could feel the key ring. He hooked his finger through it, and, with more effort than it should have taken, dragged the keys out. As he lifted his head, Martin's lights were moving around the switchback. As the lights rounded the curve, he turned on his lights and hit the high beams. A blinding light filled Lindy's car. She jammed her foot down on the brake pedal. The debris on the sole of her shoe caused her foot to slip off and land on the accelerator. The rear wheels spun violently, spraying a stream of gravel behind her. The rear tires broke loose, dropped into a shallow ditch, hit hard, and suddenly slowed. She stopped and gathered herself. She had passed the blinding headlights. She tried to ease the car out of the shallow ditch. Its reluctance caused her to press the accelerator down further. The car lurched forward and ricocheted back onto the road. Skinner had heard her car drop into the ditch, and then saw her tail lights in his side mirror. He waited, praying that she wouldn't walk up to his car and tap on his window. It would be impossible to explain what he was doing there. Since she already despised him and her mood had become unpredictable, he feared what she might do. He heard her car's engine roar and gravel flying. He shut off his lights, stepped out of his car, and prepared to run into the forest if she came for him. Gravity shut his car door. Her tail and brake lights lit him from head to toe. Once she was out of the ditch, she quickly checked her rearview mirror. Standing in the wake of her taillights was a dark red-lit figure. It couldn't be Spooky. He had been swallowed by the winged creature. She pushed the image away and watched the dark devour him as she drove on. She stopped. No. It had to be a random driver. She drove on. The red light that had swamped Skinner evaporated. In a few seconds, the brake lights of Martin's car went on. Skinner watched her taillights disappear around another curve, and he relaxed. Then he reminded himself that he was stranded. His car was out of gas. His cell phone was out of range. Great. That went really well. All that and all I've gotten from it is the smell of rotten eggs, and now I've got a long goddamn walk just to get cell reception. That woman is a plague on humanity. He paused. Hell, it could be worse. I could be lost in the forest, freezing to death, or it could be raining. He looked up to the skies, expecting a cloud to hover over him and dump a frigid rain on him. Still clear skies. He started walking. As curve after curve disappeared behind Martin, the confusing emotions and struggle to find meaning and purpose that had always been a part of her life had been left in the cavern. There was no doubt in her mind about what she would do. The hate and anger that had always been a part of her had solidified into a calm resolution that her goal was to protect Spooky. Nothing else mattered. She had never felt this pure before. Her conscience no longer plagued her. She unwrapped the necklace from her wrist. The crucifix was damp with her blood. She hadn't noticed that it had been cutting into her wrist. It seemed a fitting end to her journey. She dropped it on the seat. It took a 45-minute walk before Skinner could get reception. He called the insurance company's towing service and waited at the turnoff to the road. A little more than an hour later, they arrived, gave him enough gas and directions to the nearest station. The relief of the rescue was short-lived. His ordeal wasn't over. When he hit the Seattle city limits, sirens and flashing lights pulled him over. He was rewarded with a ticket for driving above the posted speed limit. It was early in the morning, and the police officer was in no mood to listen to his proclamation that he was a friend of the Seattle police. Skinner expressed surprise that the officer didn't know him. While he had learned nothing tangible from following Lindy, the journey into the woods and the smell of sulfur dioxide did provide an intriguing dark background for his story. At least he could use that. The investigation that she had been obsessed to solve had now become a threat to Spooky and, thus, to Tapilo, Paase, and God's will. Even though her future in the department as a lead investigator was on the line, if Spooky were to continue serving God's will, she had to make sure that the investigation stayed away from Spooky and Mount St. Helens. It was a dilemma that she was determined to resolve, whatever it took. Over the next 2 weeks, as the stalled investigation died, she suffered as she wandered between her fading sense of morality and her obedience to the voice of God that she had heard in the cavern. That the murders were going unsolved bothered her but less and less. After all, she was not wielding the sword, she was sheltering the sword wielder who was carrying out God's will. She was just protecting the heavenly orders of Old Testament biblical retribution.